Hello, everybody. Time to make another short little lecture video to help you out on understanding implementing changes within your organization. We've talked about the sacred cows. We've talked about some other aspects, and some of these are pretty simple, but I really wanted to make sure that we went over them. So what we're talking about is how is change implemented? Um, Basically, this is another factor in employee acceptance of change is the way it's implemented. We talked earlier about the leaders, if they want to do it, as opposed to hearing it from a consultant. Uh, these are things you also need to consider as well. All right. How and long will details be communicated? Okay. And basically, what that refers to is uh, how much information are you giving them, and the more the better. How long is this going to take, and so on. Um, how long will the implementation of this take? We'll talk about that here in a little bit of detail as well. Do we have the right personnel for the job? Do we have to hire individuals or not? Or what training, if any, is necessary? We're going to go through each of these four details here, sort of one at a time, and hit upon some of this, the communication aspects and all the rest of it. But know this, as you plan to implement and put forth a new way of doing things within your business, okay? And you set up a phase of changes step by step by step throughout the organization. Expect there to be problems, okay? Don't be surprised if unforeseen events happen. Don't be surprised if things don't always run smooth. A lot of companies will lay out a series of steps to make changes on how they do something, how something is handled, and a lot of times something gets in the way. And it can be a whole host of things: change in upper management, the feeling that things are not catching on as fast as you had hoped, so it's taking a little bit longer. Training is not doing the job like you want, and so things happen at a slower pace. Expect that. Expect that. That is going to occur. Things never run perfectly. I swear they don't. So let's get into these. First of all, we talk about creating an atmosphere for change. Okay. One of the things that is recommended that you do if you are within a business is, if you're going to incorporate change, all right, is to first turn around and find an opportunity to survey your people. Use what is called like an attitudinal survey. We mentioned those a few chapters back, the idea of an attitudinal survey of your employees to see how they currently feel about things. And hopefully, if you're incorporating change, hopefully you're doing it because there's dissatisfaction and things aren't working well. And so what you do is, if you run a survey and ask them if they're happy or not, and you find areas where they're not happy, there's dissatisfaction within the company, okay? Share that information with your employees. Hey, we're finding you're not happy with this, we're not happy with that, and because of it, we're going to make the following changes. Okay, it sort of justifies the change, it sort of gives it a reason for being in that regard. And obviously that is a very important aspect that one needs to do. Also turn around and be prepared when you do these kind of things, that employees, as you start to incorporate change, you've convinced them, you've done a survey, they agree to the dissatisfaction, helps to justify it. Some employees are going to turn around and start to talk about the good old days. They're going to resist the change, okay? You may have to remind them periodically of their dissatisfaction, okay, when change is occurring. You may have to remind them, remember how you said you didn't like this, that's why we're doing all this. Remember how you said you didn't like that, and so on. Um, I call it the good old days. Your book calls it the good old days. Employees start to talk about the good old days and they're resisting change. It's something you don't want. The next big thing you have to do, once you've sort of surveyed them and they know why they're not happy and why the change must occur, is you sort of have to take their hand, metaphorically. Um, Companies have to reduce the fear that sometimes comes with making all these changes. And as your book talks about, providing emotional support, opportunities to turn around and vent, opportunities to turn around and talk things out and discuss things and explain, going both ways between management and employees, you know, what we're doing, reminding them why we're doing it. A lot of times you do have to remind them, all right, and let them know that you understand. Okay. One of the things that is a good idea with any of this is explaining to employees that supervisors do this. We expect things to be rough at first. We're making a change. How we're doing things, possibly going to a team approach or whatever. We understand if you make mistakes, it's going to happen. That's what we're here for, and you won't be penalized initially if you're making mistakes as you're trying to figure these details out. Telling people that can really go a far way. Next, you want to communicate the details. Okay. Studies have found time and again, and it's sort of common sense in the minds of a lot of people, that employees, if you keep them in the know, okay, they are more open to change. You keep them well informed, and what we're doing and why we're doing it, and don't be afraid to repeat it. Sometimes you have to do that. Um, Keep them informed of why it has to happen and what's going on. We're doing this, next we're going to do that, and so on. All right. In fact, I would say, and your book says that employees should be aware of and involved in all aspects of change. Okay, all aspects, all stages, from initial planning. Keep them informed right up to the final implementation when we're getting done with it. All that has to be discussed and communicated. All right, because I guarantee you, a lack of communication, okay, causes employees to expect the worst. It's human nature that people expect the worst if they are not hearing details. You've got to keep them in the know. Don't assume they know. That's a bad thing. So let's talk about some of these tips here. Okay, tips for sort of communicating details. As I put there, communication is hard. Okay, it requires constant feedback. It really truly does. It may be necessary to occasionally get feedback from your employees. All right. It may be necessary to occasionally get feedback from your employees to make sure you know how they feel about the change as it is occurring. The worst thing you can do is assume you know how they feel. As you're going through the changes, as you're going from first stage to second to third, as you're implementing all this, some people won't look for feedback from their employees. How are we doing? How's it going? You okay with this? Talk to me. You don't do that because you figure you know what they're thinking. Don't do that. That's a very, very bad idea. Don't assume you know how they feel. Okay. Secondly, it is recommended that you train your communicators to effectively communicate. And that's not just strictly turning around and training them how to explain what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, but train them in how to listen, how to turn around and let people vent and just listen to them venting, and also how to deal with frustrated employees, which can sometimes even be hostile employees. They get mad, they get frustrated. You need to train your communicators, okay, your facilitators, your change agents, uh, how to basically dismantle an argument, how to let someone vent and not let it turn into hostility. Okay. As I said before, two-way communication is absolutely essential. Employees have to have the chance to provide feedback. You've got to make that clear to them that they can do that they can share information. All right. If they feel they're shut out, they're not going to be open to it. All right. They really aren't. And as far as you go through these stages of making changes within an organization, in a business, how things are done, I would tell them immediately. I would tell them the truth. Okay. Be forthright. Don't waste time. And tell them honestly what's going on. They deserve to know. And immediately, if possible. Very, very important. Keep them in the know as you're changing products, as you're changing how work is done, changing your shifts, whatever it is you may be doing. Okay. Keep them in the know. Some other details I want to mention here very quickly is the time frame. How long should it take you to implement change? What I say and what a lot of people say is this: the faster the better, but not too fast. Okay, the faster the better, but not too fast. You do not want change to drag on. Okay, if it takes you 3 months to incorporate changes as you phase out one thing and bring in another. I understand. If you have to phase out certain jobs and train people for new jobs and that's your change, I understand. Most consultants will tell you it should never take more than 24 months. I mean, 2 years max to make changes. Otherwise, people get very frustrated. When is this ever going to end? We started this nearly 2 years ago and we're still doing it. Absolutely 2 years max. And what I would recommend is to try to get it done over the process of a year. All right. And then finally, just to expect to do training. Train everyone who remotely needs it. I really don't know how else to put it than that. Train them to the new way things are done. Train them to the new mentality. You know, you're going to have to go through this. If you don't think someone needs it, they probably still do. Very important. All right. So these are some of the things to consider, how we look at a lot of these issues, and hopefully this gives you an insight into the steps to try and incorporate changes within your business. Keep up the great work, everyone.